Hi, I'll continue now with the chapter on the application of the fingers in Bach's book Versuch über die wahre Art, das Klavier zu spielen, and we're on paragraph 55 now. Sie's-mal im Aufsteigen nach Figur 29 hat eine einzige mögliche gute Fingersetzung. So here is figure 29, C minor ascending. And you could probably say from what Bach says that the operative word there is good. And that you can think of one could think of other fingerings for C sharp minor, like you could put the thumb on the C sharp and go 1, 2, 3 with the third finger on the E and then the thumb again on the F sharp and do it like that, where you arrive at the octave with the thumb again. So you can have other fingerings, but that fingering would be worse than it wouldn't be good. And I haven't tried it, but I would guarantee if you try it, it wouldn't work. It wouldn't be good. And it goes against what Bach says as well about the thumb being used for the black notes. So good is the operative word. And here's the AC fingering for C sharp minor ascending and descending, and I've only written it in 2 octaves this time, but I'll demonstrate it in 4 octaves, and it doesn't change for 4 octaves. So for space I just wrote 2 octaves. So I'm getting cleverer as I go along. Now you can see that it's different from the fingering Bach says is the only good fingering for C sharp minor. And so that would be something to validate what I say about the AC fingering system being unique, in that even in a case where there's so little option, that it still differentiates itself from normal fingering. And the fingering that Bach supplies could be used with the AC fingering system as well. But I would say here, and you'll have to hear me out with this, is that the operative word for the AC fingering system for C sharp minor is not good. It's not a good fingering, but that it's a better fingering. And I'm not basing that on opinion, or it's not my. I don't have a big head, or it's not my ego talking. This is, objectively speaking, this fingering is better than Bach's fingering, and I can show you how. When you see the left and right hand for the C sharp minor, you can see for the most part, like you can see the balance, how the 2 hands are balanced. And if you consider the fingering for C sharp minor that Bach provides, if you think of the hands being like this when they're perfectly balanced. Now on the C sharp and D sharp, Bach will have you use the second finger and third finger on the right hand, so these 2 fingers, and then the third finger and the second finger on the left hand. So those two fingers. So this is the hand when it's perfectly balanced. And let me see, this is a bit complicated. And these are the fingers to be used with box fingering. And so when you use those fingers together on the C sharp and D sharp, what's happening is the hand is shifting like this. And that's what you're playing together. And you can see that if you try that and just think about it, you can see the hand is imbalanced. It's lopsided. So this is the way the fingers would be if they're balanced. And this is the way they are when playing the C sharp and D sharp. So it's tipping over. Whereas with the AC fingering, you're using, so this is the hand, these are the two hands perfectly balanced. With the AC fingering, you're using the second and fourth finger on the right hand. This is even more difficult. And then the fourth and second finger on the left hand, like that. And you can see it stays. You don't have to shift the hand. The balance remains. And it's that balance that makes the AC fingering better than box fingering. So in a way, Bach was right. It is the only good one, because the AC fingering is another one, but it's a better one. So Bach wasn't wrong. But you can see how, like, my claim that it's unique, that validates. It definitely doesn't take away from that claim. If you want to dispute that claim, that doesn't. So here's C sharp minor with the AC fingering in 4 octaves. Durch im Auf- und Absteigen hat nebst dem absteigenden Gismol noch Finger 30 einerlei Finger. Dieses letztere im Aufsteigen unterscheidet sich bloß durch die Größe der Intervallen, aber nicht durch die Ordnung der Finger von den ersten, wie wir aus Figur 31 sehen. So here's B major ascending, figure 30. And you can see the fingering is the same as C sharp minor. So what Bach said in the previous paragraph in the last video about the more accidentals that the key have, the practice of that rule in the 33rd paragraph becomes easier and less dangerous. And you can see that there, the options where to put the thumb get less and less, which means it's safer and safer, that you're not putting the thumb in the wrong place. B majors and C sharp minor, that's the safest place at all. And you can see here with the rule where the way Bach says it, that the thumb comes after one or more black keys. And where I say, even though there is no rule with the AC fingering system, that it's a formula, it's governed by a formula which eliminates the need for any rules. but according to the AC fingering, the thumb would come rather before more black keys when ascending in the right hand. You can see how the thumb on the E, let's say, could be interpreted either that the thumb is coming after the D sharp or before the F sharp. And the same way on the B, that it could be interpreted that it's coming after the A sharp, or you could interpret it that it's coming before the C sharp. So you can see how a scale like B major, depending on in what camp you belong, each version can be validated, supported by that, depending on how you want to look at it. And here's G sharp minor ascending, figure 31. And the first thing I want to say is that when you in the book, the Therein writer or the publishers, they provided modern notation for Bach's examples. They included Bach's examples too, but they made an error in that, where for G sharp minor ascending, they have F sharp. Here it is here how they wrote it in for the left hand. And you can see when it's F sharp, what you have is the thumb being put on a black key, which Bach says can't be done. So normally, it's not the only mistake they make, and not all mistakes are so tragic. But this one, normally this is a glaring one, because with the thumb being put in a black key, that's a big mistake from what Bach has said. So, you can read into that what you will, how they could have overlooked that mistake. So, here I have it written out here, and when you look at Bach's versions, Bach has two sharps next to the F sharp, so it's a double sharp, that F. So here I have it with the double sharp, and so he hasn't contradicted himself in a major way or made a giant blunder, because it's still a white note, at F double sharp. So that's okay. But when you see the right hand, the E sharp, F double sharp, G sharp A, and the fingering with the thumb on the E sharp, I just want to read that sentence from the 33rd paragraph again. Das Unnatürliche besteht darin, dass der Daumen in das D eingesetzt wird, ungeachtet das I mit zwei halben Tönen darauf folgt. So you can see in G sharp minor ascending that Bach adheres to the rule in the 33rd paragraph that the thumb comes after one or more black notes on the right hand when ascending. But that with the thumb on the E sharp and the second finger on the F double sharp, that is no less natural than it is in A minor ascending, E minor ascending, B minor ascending, A major ascending, E major ascending. So again, the rule forces that inconsistency with what Bach says is the best fingering, with what Bach says is unnatural. He's forced into that unnatural situation. There is a slight difference. Bach says that the fingering doesn't differ from B major with G sharp minor ascending, other than the size of the intervals. But you can see at the beginning he uses the second finger on the G sharp, and on the octave, an octave later, he uses the third finger on the G sharp. So at the beginning there is a slight difference in the fingering. And if you are familiar or getting to know on which that which the AC fingering system is based, you will know why starting on the second finger on the G sharp is more stable or better than beginning with the third finger on the G sharp. So it's not entirely, it's 100% the same. There is a slight variation there at the beginning. And here's the AC fingering for B major. And you'll see it's the same as C sharp minor, ascending. And you can see that principle there of how, again, I've chosen this because it has the fingers doing the jobs they're best able to do, and you can see how that works out with the F sharp, G sharp, A sharp and B, that given the position of the second finger and the fourth finger, and then the position of the B on which the thumb plays, that there's then room between the second and fourth finger for the third finger. So that's when you'd use the third finger, even though that black note is not the job, it's not the job it can best do. It's the job it can best do is playing a white key. So you can see that principle at work there. And here's B major. Now the fingering that Bach provides, that as well can be used with the AC fingering. And I just, this is a sort of an indicator or an example of how, of the sort of thinking that can go into deciding which fingering to settle on in terms of what variation of fingering. And so if you have a, if you're playing a B major scale ascending fast, let's say as an embellishment or decoration in music, and it's a fast scale, well then you might, if you want to play it very fast, then you'd use 2 and 3 on the C sharp and D sharp, like Bach says it, with the AC fingering, because at that speed, the that slight shift that you'd have to make with the fourth finger from playing the D sharp with the C sharp next to it to playing the A sharp with the second finger on the F sharp then afterwards, that slight horizontal shift that could make you more prone to error than just keeping the second and third finger where they are as you ascend the scale. And so when it's fast like that, then given that the speed, it means you don't have to be so after the singing quality, the tone quality of every single note. You can sacrifice on that and opt for the third finger instead for a very fast scale. So that's an example of how, like how you can think, depending on the nature of the music, what fingering you'd choose. And so even though that fingering is not on the top tier of the AC fingering system, in some instances it can be preferable than the one I provided for the B major scale. And you can see there's an example of that in Chopin's introduction and rondo in E flat major, the introduction part. He has that run, and there you would use the 2-3 version instead of the 2-4. And it's in B major, but Chopin wrote it in C flat major. But it's basically, that's just a little helpful hint maybe. If you consider that section in B major, it's a lot easier to navigate your way through it than thinking of it as being C flat major. And here's G sharp minor with the AC fingering system. And you can see that the thumb is placed on the F double sharp, just as Bach, from what he said before about A minor ascending and E minor ascending and B minor ascending, it's placed there where Bach ideally would have it. And so you can see so far that the AC fingering has remained consistent throughout these scales. It has never had to abandon its fundamental kind of principles in order to achieve the best result. And just that fingering there in brackets at the top, yeah, you can use the third finger instead of the thumb. Again, this is just a suggestion. You can use the formula to come up with whatever fingering you prefer or best suits your needs. This is just a version. So there is an alternative. And you can see at the end there, I ended on the 3, with 3 on the boat, but I would probably be rather using the second finger on the right hand on the last G sharp and the fourth finger on the left hand, because again, if you know the AC fingering and what it's based, that the second and fourth finger, one, they're perfectly balanced, but so are the 2 third fingers. But the third finger, it's not the job it can best do playing a black note, and it works in the context of B major. And generally when there's 3 black notes, it's like the second and fourth finger are reinforcing, they're stabilizing that third finger. So even though it's doing a job it's not best at doing, it's helped, it's supported by the second and fourth finger left and right of it, so that they ensure the stability of the third finger is not alone responsible to preserve the stability. Whereas when you end with the third finger on the G sharp, you're ending on a weaker note, with a weaker finger for that black note than you'd have to, because the second finger and the fourth finger on the left and on the right and left hand respectively are doing nothing, so you can use them. So here's G sharp minor. Vies-Dur auf- und absteigend hat nebst S-Moll im Absteigen eine gemeinschaftliche unter Figur 32 abgebildete Applikatur. Die bei dem aufsteigenden S-Moll laut Figur 33 ist eben dieselbe, ungeachtet sowohl die Größe der Intervallen als auch die Schreibart von jenen unterschieden ist. Wir bemerken bei der linken Hand eine nötige Ausnahme von unserer im 33. Paragraph angeführten Regel, vermöge welcher statt des C der Daumen ins D hätte gesetzt werden sollen. So here's F sharp major ascending, figure 32. And you can see it's the same as C sharp minor ascending and B major ascending. And here's the AC fingering for F sharp major. And again, the 5 in brackets on the left hand, that can be used instead of the thumb. That's, you know, all that. Basically, you don't have much option here. You're more restricted given the number of black notes compared to white notes. So basically, the main wiggle room you have with the AC fingering is whether you're using the thumb or the little finger on the white notes. And here is E flat minor ascending. And so Bach says there was a necessary exception to the rule. And the rule for the left hand goes that the thumb is used rather before one or more black notes. And like I said before, with the AC, it's rather the opposite. That you'd rather use the thumb in the left hand when ascending rather after more black notes. And here you can see that Bach has shifted to the AC fingering system. He has opted for the AC version where the thumb comes after more black notes and ignored that principal rule for the better result. And here's the AC fingering for E flat minor. And you can see on the left hand the same, the thumb coming after the more black notes. And I have those other fingers there in brackets for the ascending part. And that is when you're thinking in terms of fingering, the fingers alternating between black and white keys. With those fingerings there, that would be an option where the third finger doesn't have to alternate between the white and the black keys. So that's just an example of how, you know, the formula can be applied depending on, again, the nature of the music, the requirements that the particular instance demands of you. Des oder Cis-Dur mit seiner Fingerordnung in beiderlei Bewegung zeigt uns Figur 34. B-Moll hat bei dem Absteigen dieselbe Applikatur. Bei dem Aufsteigen gedachten B-Molls finden wir sowohl die Abbildung der Skala als der Fingersetzung unter Figur 35. Die linke Hand hat zweierlei gute Applikatur. So here's D flat major ascending, figure 34. And again you can see it's the same as C sharp minor ascending and B major ascending, all the rest of that. And here's the AC fingering for D flat major ascending. And another thing to note, when at the very top of the scale and when it's coming back down again, if you notice that the next finger after the thumb is used is the fourth finger, that generally you could notice a pattern there, that when I'm coming down, I'm not using the same finger again, that it's better to cross over the different finger. That's easier, so that would be, if you look at the pattern of how it works at the very top and then the descent, you will notice something. And when you try it out yourself, when you play it, you might notice in the playing the difference it makes when you're not using the same finger twice as you're making your way down immediately, after one each, before and after you use the thumb. So here's D flat major. And here's B flat minor, and that version in the right hand that Bach provides, that could be used with the AC fingering. And here's B flat minor with the AC fingering system, again a version. And on right before the top, the 5 and the 1 in brackets, the 5 for the left hand and the 1, that can be used instead of the third finger. That would be an alternative option there. And again, it's down to your own decision of what you feel works better, has a better effect and feels better. But both work. The advantage of the 5 and the 1 is that there's a bit more space between. The third finger on the way up was playing a white key, and on the way down it plays a black key, so you have more space for that finger to make the alteration between playing a white key and a black key, which means a less chance of tension building. As door hat nog figure 36, so vol hinauf als herunter mit dem absteigenden F-Moll einerlei Setzung der Finger. Dieses letzteren Applikatur beim Aufsteigen ist unter Figur 37 besonders abgebildet. Die linke Hand hat hier abermals zweierlei gute Fingerordnungen, von denen die nächst den Noten die brauchbarste ist, obschon die unterste das im 35. und 46. Paragraph angeführte aufs Neue beweiset. So here's A flat major ascending, figure 36. And you see he adheres to the 33rd paragraph that the thumb comes after one or more black notes. But what you have again is the thumb coming in on the F with the second where the G follows with two black notes coming next. And here's that bit from the 33rd paragraph again. Das Unnatürliche besteht darin, dass der Daumen in das D eingesetzt wird, ungeachtet das I mit zwei halben Tönen darauf folgt. So the thumb coming in on the F in A flat major is no less unnatural than it is in A minor ascending, E minor ascending, A major ascending, E major ascending, G sharp minor ascending. It's no less unnatural. Again, the contradiction is there. And according to what he says is the best fingering for A minor ascending, Bach would have the thumb on the G before the A flat and B flat, and then again on the C. So he'd have it there, but he can't. And here's the AC fingering for A flat major, and you can see the thumb on the G. And here's F minor ascending. And again, you can see you have the thumb on the F. The second finger, even though the G is coming next with two black notes following. And that is no less natural than an A flat major or any of those other keys. And you can see he's adhering to the rule where the thumb comes after the one or more black notes. And what he says about the one in the left hand furthest away from the notes, what I would imagine what he's saying there is that word beweiset is like beweist, and the translation that would most commonly be associated with that is evidence or proof, proves, or is evidence. Beweis is evidence. But I would not be inclined to pick that for the translation. I'm hesitant to pick that, so I rather pick demonstrates, which is also a possible translation of the word. But how I understand what he's saying there is that what he's saying is here is an opportunity to try what he said in the 35th and 46th paragraph, to try for yourself to see how what he says is confirmed in your own experience of playing, of using that fingering. So that's how I would see that. And here's the AC fingering for F minor. And yeah, I picked it again for the balance, the perfect balance, and that there's no finger alternating between a black and white key. Es durchsehen wir bei Figur 38. Diese Ordnung der Finger gilt im Auf- und Absteigen. Das absteigende C-Moll hat dieselbe Applikatur. Diese Tonart, wenn sie in die Höhe geht, hat unter Figur 39 für jede Hand zwei Arten von Fingerordnungen, wovon die den Noten entlegensten nur in dem Bezirk einer Oktave in einer Folge gut sein. Wir merken hierbei an, dass je mehr die Versetzungszeichen und halben Töne sich bei den Tonart verlieren, welches hauptsächlich in den aufsteigenden weichen Skalen für die anderen geschieht, desto mannigfaltiger die Applikaturen werden. So here's E flat major, ascending. And what you have again is he adheres to the rule in the 33rd paragraph in the right hand. What you have, however, is the thumb on the F, even though the G follows with two black notes following. And so I won't read that 33rd paragraph sentence again. I guess I've kind of driven home the point. But you could, if you really want to hear it, you could skip back and watch it in the video earlier. So that's, and you can see what you have right away is the second finger alternating between a black and a white key, which from the get-go is causing is a result of extra movement. So here's the AC fingering system, the AC fingering for E flat major. And again, the AC fingering remains consistent in that the thumb is there where it best belongs. And here is C minor. And you can see again he has that crossing over technique in the outside versions. And here is a version of C minor with the AC fingering. And again the little finger in brackets, you can use that instead of the thumb when applying the formula. That's up to yourself to decide which you prefer. And it's kind of a toss-up between, if you use the little finger, what you have is the perfect balance between the hands. But you might feel a certain security when you're putting the thumb on the C as well at the same time. So that would be down to the result. Should decide the circumstances, and the result you require should really be the deciding factor in that. And you can see with Bach's fingerings, when he says with the crossing over technique that it's only good for an octave, you'll notice that he doesn't include fingerings for that D after the C, after the octave. So he ends on the C, so that would be just something to note. So that's it, we're through the scales. And now there's just a few paragraphs to recap on what Bach has discussed. Wir sehen aus der Vorschrift dieser Skalen, dass der Daumen niemals auf einen halben Ton gesetzt wird und dass bald nach dem zweiten Finger alleine, bald nach dem zweiten und dritten, bald nach dem zweiten, dritten und vierten Finger, niemals aber nach dem kleinen eingesetzt wird. Weil jede Skala 7 Stufen hat und die Wiederholung jeder Skala, bei einer Ordnung zu bleiben, ihrem Anfange ähnlich sein muss, so merke man, dass der Daumen gemeiniglich einmal nach den zweien darauffolgenden Fingern und das andere Mal nach allen dreien eingesetzt wird. Beim Aufsteigen mit der rechten Hand und beim Absteigen mit der linken heißt dieses Untersetzen. Übt man sich so lange, bis der Daumen auf eine mechanische Art sich von selbst auf diese Weise am gehörigen Ort ein- und untersetzt, so hat man das meiste in der Fingersetzung gewonnen. So, there you can see, in reference to Bärenreiter's error that they missed with the thumb on the F sharp. When the first thing Bach says after he's gone through the scales is that you can see that the thumb has never been used on a black key. You could see how such an error should really be ringing alarm bells. So, yeah. Now here Bach goes, he states, he sort of positions himself in direct opposition to the AC fingering, in that it's the the thumb is never inserted after the little finger. And I'd like to offer an explanation or speculate on that. And I've said in the other video how if you think a C major or passing the thumb under, that the third finger is the point at which it's comfortable. And once you pass that point, once you get to the fourth finger, it's already uncomfortable. And I would put forward that the weakest element of the C major scale when people are playing that the biggest obstacle is passing the thumb under the fourth finger. And if anything detracts from your performance of the C major scale, it's that. And everybody will notice it. Even Rachmaninoff noticed it with his level of virtuosity. He noticed that is the worst point. And what can happen is you can attribute that to the distance. And so if you do, you can think it's the distance that makes that so unappealing. But it's still, given the lack of choice with normal fingering, you're forced to do it, but you'd rather avoid it because it's, and you'd attribute it to the distance. But I say that attributing it to the distance is incorrect, is not what makes it, is not the decisive element that makes that so unpleasant. And I would say that the more accurate reason is that the fourth finger can't play a white key. But if you think it is the distance, you're not going to go even further than the fourth finger. So you don't even bother trying putting the thumb after the little finger, because if it's already difficult at the distance of a fourth finger, you're not going to go even further. That will obviously be worse. The result will be much worse than the fourth finger. So I would say that is what has hindered people from discovering how useful it is to pass the thumb or to insert the thumb after the little finger. And if what Bach is saying is true, it is true because he never does it. So, and that level is true. But if you want to think of it on the level that it's not good, well, by rights, all those demonstrations that I provided at those scales, they should all serve as evidence as to how it doesn't work when you insert the thumb after the little finger. Those scales that I played should be much worse than anybody's scales who's using normal fingering, because I'm doing something that doesn't work, that is much worse than putting the thumb after the fourth finger. So all those examples you should be able to use them and say, look, here it is. Here, and see it for yourself how little that works. So, and I think that's where it's misleading. When you attribute it to the distance, you're not going to go further. Further means automatically worse. But it's not about the distance. It's about the fourth finger not being able to play a white key, and the little finger being as good as any other finger at playing a white key. And that's what it's all about. So, and I think my demonstrations of the scales and how they work can be used as evidence or as backup to support my claim that it's not about the distance, because if it was, there is no way I should be able to play any of those scales well, inserting the thumb after the little finger, given the distance the thumb has to go is further than when it's crossing under the fourth finger. And as well, what I would have to do in order to prove what I'm saying is true, I would have to find examples where somebody is playing the C major scale, where when they're passing the thumb under the fourth finger, where it doesn't sound that good, where it's bumpy or uneven, where the way the notes join together is not good. So I don't know. What would you say? How would you rate my chances of finding evidence that that part of the C major scale is weak? I would say I have reasonably good chances. Wir sehen ferner, dass das Überschlagen bald mit dem zweiten Finger, bald mit dem zweiten und dritten, bald mit dem zweiten, dritten und vierten über den Daumen und mit dem dritten Finger über den vierten geschieht. Wir werden in der Folge eine kleine Ausnahme finden, vermöge welcher mit gewissen Umständen erlaubt ist, einmal den vierten Finger über den kleinen zu schlagen. Desgleichen werden wir bei Gelegenheit der Manieren einen Fall bemerken, worin der dritte Finger nach dem zweiten, wohl zu merken, eingesetzt worden. Man muss dieses Einsetzen nicht mit dem Überschlagen verwechseln. Überschlagen heißt, wenn ein Finger über den anderen gleichsam wegklettert, indem der andere noch über der Taste schwebt, welche niedergedrückt hat. Bei dem Einsetzen hingegen ist der andere Finger schon weg und die Hand gerückt. Endlich sehen wir bei dieser Abbildung der Tonleiter, dass die ohne oder mit dem wenigsten Versetzungszeichen die meisten Veränderungen von Applikaturen erlauben, indem allda das Untersetzen sowohl als das Überschlagen angeht und dass die übrigen nur einerlei Abwechslung der Finger gestatten. Folglich sind die sogenannten leichten Tonarten, weil ihre Applikatur so verschieden ist und man beide Hilfsmittel zur rechten Zeit gebrauchen lernen muss, ohne sie zu verwirren, weil es nötig ist, die einmal erwählte Ordnung in der Folge beizubehalten und man also wohl zu merken hat, wo der Daumen eingesetzt worden. Viel verführerischer und schwerer als die sogenannten schweren Tonarten, indem sie nur eine Art von Fingersetzung haben, allwo der Daumen durch die Übung in seinen ordentlichen Platz sich von selbst eindringen lernt. Diese letzteren behalten den Namen der schweren nur aus der Ursache bei, weil entweder gar nicht oder selten aus selbigen gespielt und gesetzt wird. Hierdurch bleibt ihre Schreibart sowohl als die Lage ihrer Tasten allezeit fremd. Durch die wahre Lehre und Anwendung der Fingerordnung werden uns also diese schwerere Tonarten ebenso leichte, als groß die Schwierigkeit war, auf eine falsche Art, besonders ohne Daumen oder den rechten Gebrauch desselben in solchen vorzukommen. Einer der größten Vorzüge des Klaviers, vermöge dessen man mit besonderer Leichtigkeit aus allen 24 Tonarten spielen kann, ist also durch die Unwissenheit der rechten Applikatur verborgen geblieben. So, what's interesting here is if you hear people of authority talking about Chopin, and they'll credit him with kind of being the one to discover that B major is actually easier than C major, that C major is one of the most difficult scales, or is the most difficult scale of them all, and that B major is much easier, and that he kind of went against the popular belief that, or the tradition of calling C major and those scales easy scales, and B major and any scales with lots of sharps and flats the difficult scales. So if you're watching this video and you hear an expert talking crediting that to Chopin, you will know that that expert is wrong. That Bach was saying that 80 years earlier. Exactly that. Bach understood that the calling them easy and difficult keys is just a kind of a misconception. And so you'll be able to put up your hand and correct the expert. So that's, and there was something that, a guy working, he was a manager. He said, my dad told me this, that he said that in order to get somebody, somebody who's in a position of authority or who thinks you don't have to know everything they know. All you need to do is find out that thing they don't know, and you have them. So when you put up your hand, when you see that expert, hear that expert talk, and now you're in a position to know, hold on, that's not right. Chopin didn't come up with that. Bach did. You can put up your hand and you can say, I think if you check, you'll find out that Bach was the one who figured that out, not Chopin. You'll have them. You'll have them. And you can refer them to this video where, it's read directly from the source as proof. Your assertion will be verified and backed up. Das Untersetzen und Überschlagen als die Haupthilfsmittel in der Abwechslung der Finger müssen so gebraucht werden, dass alle Töne dadurch gut zusammengehängt werden können. Deswegen ist in den Tonarten mit keinen oder wenigen Versetzungszeichen bei gewissen Fällen das Überschlagen des dritten Fingers über den vierten und des zweiten über den Daumen besser und nützlicher, um alles mögliche Absetzen zu vermeiden, als der übrige Gebrauch des Überschlagens und das Untersetzen des Daumens, weil selbiger bei vorkommenden halben Tönen mehr Platz und folglich auch mehr Bequemlichkeit hat, unter die anderen Fingern durchzukriegen, als bei einer Folge von lauter untenliegenden Tasten. Bei den Tonarten ohne Versetzungszeichen geschieht dieses Überschlagen ohne Gefahr des Stolperns hintereinander. Bei dem anderen aber muss man wegen der halben Töne mehr behutsam brauchen. So, again, just with that Chopin thing, you can see that Bach, not only was he aware that with the fingering it's easier with a scale such as B major, but also he was aware of how passing the thumb under works better, that there is more space for the thumb than when it's just, as he called them, the lower lying keys, or the keys situated on the, there's the two level of the keys, and the one on the lower, the white keys. When there's just the white keys, the thumb has less room to pass under. So Bach knew all of that, what Chopin has been accredited as kind of realizing 80 years beforehand. And I just want to say, here is again another useful insight into the application of this crossing over technique with the third finger over the fourth finger repeatedly, or the second finger over the thumb. And so you have the insight that the rule that it's actually used for when there's only white keys, and you do use it when there's a single black key. Here you get more insight into how to use it, is like why you're using it. It's the chance of stumbling is less. The chance of you're avoiding that passing under the thumb, under the fourth finger, which can cause a break. can stop the notes from hanging together well, as he says, or being joined together well, or connected together well, this can be a stumbling block. And by using that technique is a good way to avoid that, prevent that from happening. So you're getting extra insight into what the objective is, why you're using that, which helps you use it correctly. And it makes your performance more authentic. If you're going for an authentic performance, you will know what goal do you want to achieve with that. Why are they doing it? You can better think with their mindset when applying that. So in that paragraph is more useful, is useful for applying that technique and knowing how to apply it so you've applied it correctly. Because if you don't know that, you're just applying it blindly, you're just going through the motions, and you've no idea if you've done it right or wrong. If you don't know why, what is the objective? You're doing it. And it's the same like in Beethoven. You know, if you're just doing the crescendos and the diminuendos as he's written them in, if you don't know why he wrote them in, if you don't know what the objective is, well, then you're just going through the emotions and you've no idea if you've done them properly. And a good example could be in the Tempest Sonata in the third movement, those crescendos and diminuendos. If you don't know why he wrote them in, you're following blindly in the hope that when you go through the motions, you're going to get it right, but you won't know exactly what it is Beethoven had in mind. And they would be a case of, Beethoven has said about the expression marks that, you know, with musicians, I don't know the exact wording, but basically he was saying that the people who don't have a clue, those expression marks anyway don't help. And the people who do know, they don't need those expression marks. And so normally you wouldn't need those diminuendos and crescendos in the Tempest Sonata movement, because you do them anyway because you know why Beethoven put them in there. But if you don't know why he put them in there, you know you're just trying to be, you know, faithful to what he says and obeying what he says, but you don't know what the point is. And it's not about expression. I mean, it's not about the emotion or the beauty of the music. They have a function. And it's the same here. So that helps him explaining that helps you use that technique well, and it puts you in a position where you can figure out exactly how it was used and exactly the result you're looking for, which means you know when you're doing it right or when you're doing it wrong. So I would combine the information in that paragraph with what he said in the 35th paragraph and what he said, you know, in the 46th paragraph too, or, you know, all those, I'd connect them all together, those pieces of information together. And it provides a great guide in performance practice and utilizing that technique authentically and effectively. Nach diesen Skalen und nach dem in selbigen befindlichen Gebrauch der beiden Hilfsmittel werden alle gehende einstimmigen Gedanken beurteilt. Von einigen hierbei besonderen Fällen und Freiheiten wird zuletzt gehandelt werden. So that's it. That's the scales done. And Bach is gonna go on now and talk about the, the many voiced or the polyphonic ideas in the fingering for them. So we made it true. So thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Bye.